Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. And today we are presented to you by Manscaped. You can go to Manscaped right now and get 20% off plus free shipping from their electric foil shaver, which, by the way, I have myself. I've been using to try to trim up the beard, get it looking all right. It looks decent. I could do a better job, but that's on me. That's not on the product. That's on the user. You got to get better. And Manscaped is helping me get better. So go to manscaped.com, type in the code BIGBLUE, and you'll get 20% off plus free shipping. It's a pretty damn good deal. You can upgrade your facial hair game. That's something that Nick is good at. But I got to say, Nick, I recently saw a video of you on Instagram. It was like one of those like little, cute videos. Like, I've loved you since 2025. It's 2025 and I've loved you since 2021 videos that everybody's posting on Instagram. But it was you and your dog. It was you and Phoenix, who actually looks like he's just look at him behind you, just chilling over there. A dog's life. It's so nice. It really is. It's 11:34 a.m. and he's just sleeping. He's just taking a nap. That's what he wants to do with his day. Why would he not? He doesn't pay rent or anything. He doesn't worry about rent or anything. So he just can do what he wants. But it was like, I loved you since 2021, Phoenix. And it was you, Nick, with long hair and a full beard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the look for you, my friend. I know I've told you this before, and it has no bearing on what you're going to ultimately do. But I will say this. I like that look. And if I could go that full beard, my guy, I would do it any day.
Thank you. Yeah, the beard might make a return, but
okay.
Are other things going to make a return to aspects of all of our lives listening to this podcast? And that's what this podcast is about, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about if the Giants are headed toward a return toward the end of Gettleman and the end of Reese years from a locker room standpoint. Is the locker room culture collapsing in on itself? And why are we asking that question? Well, we're asking that question because of things that happen and things that have surfaced in the recent 24 hours. So the Giants made the decision to bench Daniel Jones. They made a decision to demote him to quarterback 3 instead of quarterback 2. And they made the decision to start Tommy DeVito over Drew Lock. Now, as far as the decision to move him to quarterback 2 to quarterback 3, I think it is fair to say, Nick, that is purely a financial decision, right? They don't want him getting injured in practice or around the team facility as the quarterback 2. They don't want to put him back in a game where he could get injured. And, they're getting a lot of crap from this, from, I guess, some fans and then from an unnamed player who we'll get to in a moment. We'll get to that quote. And then from Dexter Lawrence, who said, I believe Daniel Jones is the QB1. And I don't, that's my opinion on it. And he should be the QB1. But when this happened with Derek Carr, Nick, and the Raiders, when this happened with Russell Wilson and the Broncos, it was accepted because it's a reality. If you sign a contract with an injury guarantee and you don't produce, the deal is you may get benched for partly financial reasons. When Daniel Jones signed that contract and added in an injury guarantee, let's not victimize him. He is making a ton of money, and this is part of the deal. If you don't have that injury guarantee right now, Nick, he might be starting, or he might at least at worst be QB2. But that's part of the process. This team is 2-8. They're out of the playoffs. It's over for them this season. They need to be thinking about 2025, and they can't take the risk of throwing another $25 million against the cap on a dead contract of Daniel Jones because they wanted to be nice to him and not let him be, we need to do the right thing by Jones and make him QB2 or whatnot. Because that doesn't make any sense for a franchise. And they'd be ridiculed, Nick, even more so than they already are if they did decide to make him QB2 or decided to keep playing him in a lost season. And he did get his 3rd season-ending injury in 6 years because he's had 2 already. And he's had other damage to his neck. So I am just not on board with this victimization personally. And I'm not on board with knocking the Giants for this decision because it's what every team has done when they've been in the same spot.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily piling on to the Giants, but the reality of the situation, losing begets dysfunction. And that's exactly what is going on with the New York Giants right now. They are losing and they look dysfunctional. The entire NFL is laughing at them. And that has to just eat at ownership and everything, right? When you look at the Giants situation, I can see why some players will view the quarterback room and say, Daniel Jones is the best option. Because frankly, I think Daniel Jones is a better option than Tommy DeVito. But as all you guys listen to this podcast know, I've been pounding the drum that you need to bench Daniel Jones because the reality of the situation is that $23 million guaranteed if Jones ends up getting injured. That's a reality. The players, they're professionals. They have to know that that's a reality at this point. And I don't know if these anonymous reports are representative of the locker room.
I agree.
I think it's probably one player I think I have the player in mind, if I'm going to be honest. I think you probably know who the
I think we
player is.
all do.
I think everybody knows who the player is. He was very active on Instagram last week. I think it's that player.
He may have once worn a shirt that says "No more DJ slander."
Yes, exactly. I think it's that player who is coming out now. I think Dexter Lawrence has respect. I think a lot of these guys like Daniel Jones. They go out, they hang out with Daniel Jones. And it is fair to say not all of this is on Daniel Jones. Dan and I have said that for a very long time, but we also understand and acknowledge that Daniel Jones has a limited ceiling. When you have a limited ceiling, it puts such a pressure on everything else. I don't think Daboll is faultless. I don't think Joe Schoen is faultless. And these next 7 to 8 weeks are going to be crucial for especially Brian Daboll's job. I don't know as much about Joe Schoen, but if this Tommy DeVito thing ends up blowing up in the face of the New York Giants, this is going to reflect so poorly on this regime, on Joe Schoen and on Brian Daboll. But none of this really surprises me from this Jordan Schultz report.
Yeah, and the question that we have to ask ourselves now, and I'll say this, I think I agree with you that Daniel Jones is probably a better option than Tommy DeVito, but I don't think it's necessarily this lock and loaded type of thing that some fans have made it out to be because
I like how you did that. I don't
loaded.
even know if you did that on purpose.
No, I did not. Did not mean to do that because, like, on paper and not on paper. That's obviously what I'm about to get to. But eye test wise, it's easier to say Daniel Jones is a better option than Tommy DeVito. And I think that's what the players have seen in practice, right? He's bigger. He has an arm. He can make a lot of throws that DeVito won't. And to be fair, DeVito's final run with the Giants, those final few quarters with the Giants were really bad football. They were, third string level backup football. And that's fair to say. He was holding on to the football, DeVito. He was taking sacks. He wasn't moving the ball. They were punting a lot. Things that haven't necessarily happened at all times throughout Daniel Jones's 2024 season, as bad as it's been. But the reality is, on paper, because we're looking at the eye test and we're looking at on paper, Jones is 3-13 in his last 16 starts with 10 touchdown passes in 16 games and 13 interceptions. On paper, strictly speaking, that is backup level play. That is bench-worthy level play. On paper, strictly speaking, on tape, strictly speaking, the game against Carolina was a third-string level game. That's what it was. He missed reads. He held onto the football. He escape pockets he doesn't need to escape. There were receivers running wide open on the tape. And I mean wide open. That was the most open Brian Daboll has gotten his receivers in the history of his tenure with the New York Football Giants. It was some of the best route combinations, but also Carolina secondary sucks. It was dead last by a wide margin.
Other than JC, let's not disparage my guy JC
Other than
Horn.
JC Horn. He was a good player. He's a good player. But the rest of that, I mean, that secondary is a mess. It was, which was actually worse, though, by the way. I was watching back all the DeVito tape last night because I made a cut up. The Washington game that DeVito started, there were like 3 communication breakdowns in the secondary that led to like wide open Bellinger, wide open Slayton. When I'm just talking like the easiest throws ever for DeVito with like clean pockets, too. So just like that was actually worse than what Carolina put on tape.
It's the only game I think he threw for over 200 yards, too. A lot of people are misremembering the Tommy
DeVito. Yes. And I want to make it clear, I don't have high hopes for DeVito. I put together a fun cut up of his best stuff from last year just because it was fun to go through it and try to project what we might see. And it's different. It's going to be different, but I'm not necessarily sure he's going to be better. But this idea that Jones was only benched for the financial purposes is just unacceptable to me because he's played so poorly that this is partly because of his play. You can't watch that Carolina game, and they watched it with their teammates, with their coaches, and say that this is starter level, that this deserves to be starting. Now, I would make the case that Drew Lock should have gotten the shot, but I understand why the Giants aren't doing that, and that is where the dysfunction comes in, Nick, because the decision to go to DeVito over Lock, to me, is because they want to see if DeVito can be part of their long term. They want to see if DeVito could maybe be a QB2. And that is all about 2025 when these players are being sold a bill that we want to win now, right? That Schoen and Daboll have said, no. Everything we do is a football decision. Everything we do is to win now. And that's when I start to worry about dysfunction coming in, right? Your coaches and your GM are telling the players and are putting together this idea that everything we do is to win now, while their actions are not necessarily backing that up. And that's when I worry, dude, because when it happened with Reese and when it happened with that locker room, there was no going back from it. The dysfunction seeped through and it was unbearable, unbreakable, and you were done. You had to move on. When it happened again with Gettleman, with Judge, with the whole, you run laps after practice, everybody's walking on eggshells in that locker room. There was no coming back from that dysfunction either, Nick. It tore him down and it ripped apart. Now we are looking at this team with Schoen and Daboll thinking in our heads, Nick, there's most likely they're coming back next year. But are they also coming back while being dysfunctional? Are the Giants a dysfunctional locker room that can't come back from it with these two at the helm? And then where are we headed?
The players don't like being sold a bill of goods that's false. Some of the players understand that. I think others probably acknowledge the situation. Some might be happy for Tommy DeVito. You really touched on a crucial point, and it's why isn't Drew Lock getting out there? What's the reason for Drew Lock not getting an opportunity? Is it because Tommy DeVito is a possible long-term backup option? Sure, but not solely. Because Drew Lock, if he was good in training camp, if he was good in practice, and if the Giants thought that he comprehended this system well enough, he would 100% be out there. 100%.
Yeah.
And then possibly playing for an extension of his contract. But he's not good in practice. He wasn't good in training camp. The good in practice part, I'm assuming. So they're giving it to Tommy DeVito over Drew Lock. Because if you put Drew Lock out there and he falls flat on his face, that is going to reflect so badly on the regime, Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, and the New York media would just eat the New York Giants alive.
That's such a good point by you, Nick, that I don't think.
I think Duggan has made that same point, but it is something that I just want to, but at the same time, it is also something that you can connect the dots. It's not, out there to believe this and think this, especially if you brought in Drew Lock and you spoke highly of Drew Lock all throughout the offseason. And then my dumbass gets into training camp and I'm looking around and I'm like, this freaking guy, are you kidding me? He's not completing any passes. Every freaking play, he's running. He's bailing the pocket every single time. And there's a bunch of linebackers walking by slapping his ass because he can't get hit. Like, that's not going to work in the NFL. Now Tommy DeVito is usurped him, and he's the starting quarterback over Drew Lock, who is going to maintain his incumbency as the second. Like, there's something off there about that specific situation. There's a lot off about the entire situation.
And that's interesting to suggest that possibly they might be trying to hide themselves, right? By playing DeVito over Lock. Because if you play DeVito, it's almost like a house money play, right? Like, you could say, whatever, we're throwing DeVito out there. We know this is a third, an undrafted free agent. He had some fun last year. He won some games. He gave us a spark, as Daboll has mentioned. He mentioned earlier this week, Daboll, we wanted to get a spark. We wanted to shake things up. And that's what we got last year when we played DeVito, right? And technically they did, even though we know, us who can look at this objectively know, DeVito and the offense had negative EPA in all of DeVito's wins. One was negative 14 EPA. One game that DeVito won, the defense forced 6 turnovers. That's not DeVito winning, right? One game DeVito won, Mac Jones handed the Giants the game. That's not DeVito winning. One game, Green Bay, DeVito made some big plays and big moments, but reality is the defense kind of won them that game too by shutting down Jordan Love in the first half. And you mentioned it just recently. DeVito only eclipsed 200 yards once, passing once last season. That was with just crazy breakdowns going on in that Washington secondary. I just watched the tape of that. Wild breakdowns going, like wide open receivers. You could see on the tape I put out on the cut up earlier on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, and then we remember the Jet game when he got in there, dude. It was just like the Giants just would not throw the football. And that was his
back
first
to Jake Fromm level.
Yeah, it was Jake Fromm level. Now he developed and he grew a lot.
Yeah.
From then up until the end of the season. And we saw that and we went over that a lot last year. But man, dude, this entire situation, it could be a nightmare. And another thing about the DeVito situation, and we brought this up in the last podcast, they're trying to rekindle some sort of interest in this dead 2024 year. And Tommy DeVito did that in 2023. And it led to us falling in the draft a little bit to pick 6, but that's neither here nor there. He has he has the agent dressed like that. And a lot of people get galvanized by Tommy DeVito because he is the local kid, chicken cutlets, lives at home, mom does his laundry, all that kind of stuff. So I think that plays into it as well. Look, running an NFL team, it's a business, bro. It's a business. It's more than just who is the best to win at this point in a lost season. I think there are a lot of variables and a lot of factors that went into the decision to starting Tommy DeVito. Now, will it blow up? That's something that we will be monitoring intently over the next 7 weeks. Hey, everyone. With the holidays creeping up faster than your aunt's fruitcake recipe, I've got something way better to share with you. If you want to look sharp for all those festive gatherings and maybe finally win that best groomed at the family dinner award, check out the latest masterpiece from Manscaped, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. Trust me, it's like Rudolph for your face, guiding you to a smooth, irritation-free shave. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trusted Manscaped by using code BIGBLUE for 20% off plus free shipping. Think of Manscaped as your grooming superhero. The skin-safe 4-blade foil for when you want that baby's bottom smooth, and that skin-safe stubble trimmer for when you want to keep some stubble, but clean it up a bit so you'll look good for the holidays. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. And you can have a similar experience. To get this new customer offer from Mint Mobile and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. That's 3 Bs. $45 payment upfront required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Look, we all wear underwear every single day, and we all have complaints. They ride up, they're not comfortable, they don't fit correctly. I shared these complaints until I started wearing Skims. When I tried Skims stretch boxer briefs, I felt like I finally found that missing link. They gave me all the movement I needed for the workout. They were comfortable while I was sitting here podcasting and watching all of this New York Giants film. Everything from the texture to the fit worked for me, and it will work for you too. It is a great product, and I highly recommend it. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows.
When they made the decision, and I tweeted about it this week, Nick, and I'm not sure if you got the same, but you might have. I got replies immediately like, I'm going to go to the game now. And I wasn't going to go to the game otherwise for Jones, because no one wants to watch Daniel Jones anymore except for his Homer fans. Like, everybody's sick. Who would want to watch a guy that has 10 touchdown passes in the last 16 games? Like, it's unwatchable football with him. That doesn't mean DeVito will be better football. We don't know that. The end of DeVito was bad, but these people want to see something different, and they're ready for it, and they're excited about DeVito. You know, this kid is an underdog story. He's not big. He doesn't have a huge arm. He doesn't have the physical tools. He was undrafted, and he won some games last year despite all of those factors working against him. So there is that factor. I think John Mara knows about that and is approving of that, Nick. But what you said is important at the end, because that's what this is going to come down to. Like, will this blow up in the Giants' faces, and will this blow up in this regime's faces? Will this decision to bench Jones, if DeVito is bad enough, right? If what you said is true, like, not true, but like what you said carries over in that end that we saw of DeVito, you know, now the teams have tape on him, right? Because now teams are going to have the tape from last year to watch and take away stuff. And if he's really unplayably bad, like Fromm level, like he was in that Jets game or toward the end, it might blow up in this regime's face. You might have teammates, you might have players, you might have people losing faith in the regime and the organization because of what you just said, Nick. They don't want to be sold a bill of goods that's, we're trying to win. We're trying to, you know, do you guys right who are putting your bodies on the line for your families and give you the best chance to win on Sunday when they're punting every possession, right? Or DeVito can't do anything on the field. And I'm not saying that will happen with DeVito. I don't know what's going to happen with this kid in his second run, but you know, it's possible. And it's not like, it's what we talked about when we had our reaction show 2 days ago, Nick. Like, I'm not as excited about watching DeVito as I am Locke. And I may be overrating what Locke could have been, but I'm just judging on what I saw last year against the Eagles.
Traits, man. You're judging off traits.
No, I'm judging off the Eagles game and the San Francisco game that I watched last year.
And traits. Like, if you look at Drew Locke's traits, the guy can throw the football 60 yards effortlessly on a line too. Like, he has a lot of velocity when he rears back. He's got a huge arm. He's got a cannon. He's got a much bigger arm than even Daniel Jones has, right? So we're not seeing that. We're going with this guy who does not necessarily have that type of arm strength, that type of drive on the football. But, you know, we're going to wait. We're going to evaluate. We're going to see. It's going to be exciting, I guess. And, geez, man, Brian Daboll, that seat is.
But the key is that, right? It's the Daboll Schoen thing. They can't lose this locker room. If they lose this locker room, and this goes back to, like, this whole culture thing, right? Like, they built this culture, this smart, tough, dependable culture. Well, now it seems to be in and on itself collapsing. Why? Because they're losing football games. That's how it always collapses.
Of course. Yeah. And when you look at what's going on with the locker room. You look at, I think it was Bobby Okereke liked something on Instagram a few weeks ago.
I didn't see that. Yeah.
Darius Slayton with the, "Oh, you're a free man." He said on Nick
McLeod.
McLeod's Instagram post. The Nick McLeod situation, I think, rubbed people the wrong way for sure, because Nick McLeod did everything correctly, did everything he was asked of, and he was just released. And, sometimes you got to make football decisions, but you got to balance football decisions with the locker room. And I know Joe Schoen knows that. He's spoken about that. That's something Dave Gettleman was very poor at when he was in Carolina and when he was the general manager of the New York Giants. And I think that Nick McLeod release pissed off some of the Giants players. Now, that anger and that ire could metastasize with more losing. And at that point, that's where it's like, what do we do? What do we do moving forward? I really don't think the Giants want to fire anybody. But if Daboll loses out the rest of the games and they finish with 2 wins on this season, you can't go forward with Brian Daboll, especially if the locker room resents him. So
I think it's more of that second part too. Like if we start to see more stuff happening from a locker room standpoint and more loss of faith, and it won't even be what we hear, Nick, because I think some of this bullshit that we hear, it's agent driven, to be completely honest, but it'll be what they see, what John Maris sees going on in that locker room.
Well, I think some of it's agent driven, but we're seeing guys on social media vent their frustration, and it's November right now. Right. And we know what happened last year. We bring it up a lot on this podcast, but it's important because this shit carries over into the next season. You had your head coach and your defensive coordinator basically at odds the entire year, and it blew up. And you had positional coaches who may not even, I don't even know if they spoke with Brian Daboll. Positional coaches, like the outside linebacker coach and his brother, Drew Wilkins and his brother, right? Like that's not a good situation. That's not a healthy environment. And if that bleeds down into the players, you can't go into another season with a coach who does not have the respect of the locker room, because it's just going to be a recipe for disaster. More disaster.
That's it. And that's the main thing that could come of this, right? That what we're seeing right now, which is, and I think it's more so like, to me, I think there's more credence in what you just said, the whole idea, the way they handled the Nick McLeod situation, than the way they handled this Daniel Jones benching. I think that, we've only really heard from 2 players that are against this Daniel Jones benching. One was Dexter Lawrence, and here's the quote from Lawrence. He said, "He's the QB1. To me, he's the best quarterback on the team, but they see things differently. I guess that's all that matters." And Dexter Lawrence roomed with Daniel Jones in 2019 when they first came into the NFL. They've been, and Dexter Lawrence called him his best friend. So clearly they have a close relationship. So there's that. And then you have the Schultz report, which was from Jordan Schultz, who said there's disappointment, quote unquote, among some Giants players regarding how the Daniel Jones situation was handled, with some players, especially with players aware it was primarily a financial decision by the organization. That is not any quote from players, but he did have one offensive player who he will remain anonymous, according to Schultz, say, "We're not idiots. They did it because of money. So be it. But Daniel has been all class, never complained, is now being completely disregarded. The team record is bad. You can point fingers everywhere. Try to blame him as trash, and making him third stream is weak as fuck." So that was the quote that Jordan Schultz got from an anonymous player. And look, I'm not denying. I believe that quote is real. I think he's a strong reporter, and I'm sure that whoever he's locked in with has made that quote. And that's the other thing you have to consider with reporters. They have relationships with players. They have relationship with agents to get information. But Nick, there's also the other side of this, which is we can watch with our own eyes that flea flicker play on tape, which we broke down on our film review last week, Nick. And you could see a player who's never once complained about his role, never once complained about touches, never once complained about anything, and is genuinely just a good guy. And from all accounts, from every interview we've heard, Wan'Dale Robinson fire his hands up on the flea flicker in disgust and frustration. Brian Daboll fire his hands up on the flea flicker in disgust and frustration, because that was one of the most poorly executed plays by a quarterback they've ever seen and they've ever been a part of. And that sounds hyperbolic, but I just put up a clip from last year, Tommy DeVito running a flea flicker, and he catches the football, knows where to go with it, doesn't take gather steps, and gets rid of the goddamn football because it's a flea flicker. And you're not supposed to take 2 gather steps and look down the field and panic. And, "Oh, where's my guys open? I have no idea." And then take a sack to knock you out of field goal range and basically take points off the board, killing that game among all the other frustrating plays. Blake Neighbors didn't throw his hands up when Daniel Jones airmailed him after that perfectly run route on that 3rd and 8, but he could have, and he did a good job not doing that. He showed self-discipline to not do that, in my mind at least. So it's like at some point, Nick, Let's hold him accountable for how he's playing. It's not all just about he's a good guy. He works hard. He's the best guy from the eye test, and he may still be the best quarterback. But when you're playing as poorly as he's played, and he has played god-awful. He's 3-13 in his last 16 starts. Do you understand how bad that is? He has 10 touchdown passes in 16 games. That is not a starting quarterback by any means, by any stretch, by any nature of what that should be. So at some point, the coaches held him accountable by benching him. The fans have held him accountable long ago. The players also have to hold him accountable. To me, man, it's a loser culture if you're not holding him accountable for his lack of play. It's not just all about his work ethic and what he does and what he means to you and the team and him putting his body on the line. When you have a bunch of players, and I'm not sure it's a bunch, but according to that source from Schultz, it is. But if you have a bunch of players who are not holding him accountable for his poor play and acting in this way, it's a loser-ass culture. I don't care about smart, tough, dependable, or any of that bullshit at that point. You are a loser culture. You have to hold somebody accountable. You know, everyone else is held accountable. Deontay Banks is held accountable. All these other position groups are held accountable. The quarterback is in the same boat to me.
What does that tell you, though? That if there are multiple players beyond the one completely anonymous guy that we are not going to assume or presume who that is, it tells you that those players are blaming somebody else more than Jones. And they're smart.
Good point.
These are smart guys, right? These are smart guys. They know football. They understand that Daniel Jones has left a lot of plays on the field. But they might not diagnose that Daniel Jones is the biggest problem with the team. So, what is the most valuable position, Dan, in football?
Quarterback.
But who is above the quarterback?
The head coach.
The offensive coordinator. Who is the offensive coordinator?
The head coach.
The head coach. So my point being,
yeah,
I think there might be a real problem in this locker room that we're starting to see the light peek through, right? This facade of, hey, everything's okay. We got everything together. I think that light is peeking through and it's starting to hit us all directly in the eyes, if it hasn't already. But I think a lot of those players, depending on how many there are, because there's certainly one, we know, Slayton, with the comment on Nick McLeod's Instagram post, who is not going to be a New York Giant past this season, who wants out of here, it seems like he does not like this environment, this culture, this coach, possibly, I'm going to say, right?
Yes.
If there's more than just him, that shit will metastasize. And that's not, you need to nip that in the bud. And that type of feeling, that type of emotion, that shit grows and it spreads. It's a freaking virus, dude, in a locker room, especially if you're losing, man. That's when you're just sick, and that's how things die. And I'm afraid that may happen with this current regime, specifically Brian Daboll, if they don't start winning football games or putting points on the board or what have you. But if those relationships are already fractured, Dan, it's like, can you even salvage it at that point?
And that's the problem that we're in right now, Nick, as podcasters and as fans of this team, because, you know, I could tell you at points of my fanhood with this team and with this regime specifically that I have felt strongly that they are a quarterback away. Now I have to put that into question. I have to put into question, are they a quarterback away and are they a regime away? Are they a GM and a coach and a good feeling locker room culture away? And I understand that winning would have changed everything, and it will do, but I don't understand, or I don't completely feel right now, Nick, that getting a quarterback is going to fix this right now, which I am scared to say, but it's the truth, because I'm not sure this locker room culture is right. I think it could be rotten. I think it could be rotten from the core right now and getting worse and worse with these two at the helm.
It could be, but can winning bring it back? Like, we don't know. We're speculating. There are certainly signs that this culture could be rotten, but we're speculating as to the extent of its rottenness. And if you can string together 2-3 wins, can Daboll win that locker room back? I don't know how the entire locker room feels. I don't know how many players there are within the locker room who may have a resentment towards the head coach. And I don't want to necessarily act as if it's more than maybe it actually is, right? There's no way for us to tell. It's all conjecture. But I do know that basically you go back to last season, another losing season, there was a lot of weird shit going on with this coaching staff. They bring everything back, and now it's here again. The losing is here again, accompanying it. And you've basically exhausted all of your options to blame somebody else.
Yeah.
And now
you're right about that. This was their last, option to blame.
Yeah. Literally, you're like, okay, we're going to remove Wink Martindale. He's gone. We didn't get along. Oh, Mike Kafka, I'm going to call the plays. We're going to get this offense on track. Dead last in offense right now. Okay. Now we're going to bench the starting quarterback who had issues for sure. And now Brian Daboll's like, all right, who else next? And there's just a mirror directly in front of him. And it's like, oh, There's no other thing. I need to start winning. I need to put points on the board. And if at the end of the year they escape the season with 3 wins, you think like that's going to inspire any hope to bring him back? You think the media or the fans are going to not pressure the hell out of ownership to not have him back, especially if the locker room starts to fracture? And you have all these guys who are on these 1-year deals. There's not a ton of them because the Giants have like a core of guys who are under contract, guys like Slayton and guys like that. They're on these 1-year deals. If they keep talking shit like openly, like on Instagram, like that's a terrible look for the New York Giants.
You're right. And it is interesting, Nick, because I do think cultures can flip really fast, right? Like the Washington Commanders culture was god awful last year. You go back and read anything, go back and watch the effort that those defenders were putting on the field on the tape. I just watched the Giants Commanders game with DeVito last year, among others. It is beyond piss poor. You go look at the Patriots culture last year, beyond piss poor. Some people speculation they've quit on Coach Belichick, like, issues upon issues. Now you look at both of those cultures right now, Washington and New England is so far away from a roster standpoint, right? Like anyone in their right mind would look at the Giants roster and New England roster if you don't look at the quarterback position and say the Giants are way ahead of New England from a roster standpoint. New England has the worst offensive line in the NFL, literally the worst pass blocking grade in the NFL, and no receivers to speak of, no talent from a skill position standpoint. And a defense that's playing pretty well with the coach right now because but they weren't playing well early in the year. You know why? Jacoby Brissett was starting early in the year. Do you know who's starting now? Drake May, who just put on unbelievable tape against the Rams. I just watched it. It was phenomenal. And I'll give you some stats to back this up. Drake May, since 2006, is the best player when it comes to team EPA per dropback with team pass block rate. I just tweeted this chart out so those can see it if those are interested on Twitter. He has dealt with, since 2006, of all first-round rookie quarterbacks, no quarterback has had worse pass blocking than Drake May. The only ones who came close were Bryce Young and Josh Rosen, both of who were god-awful as rookie quarterbacks. Drake May, his EPA is light years ahead of those quarterbacks. He is actually performing at an insane good level when you consider how bad his pass blocking is, and he has no wide receivers. He has reinvigorated that team. He's reinvigorated the culture, Nick. So I'll tell you this, when people try to sell me the bill, like last year, that those DeVito wins are good for the culture.
Yeah, we do this all the time.
I do this a lot because
you do. Yeah.
It's very important to me, Nick. Because I'll tell you what would have been better for the culture. Losing those games last year and getting Drake May on this goddamn roster. If they had Drake May right now, none of this bullshit would be happening with Dexter Lawrence, with unnamed sources, because he would have brought a new spark to this franchise. And god damn it, he didn't even need neighbors. He doesn't need Hyatt, Wandell, and Slayton would be better than what he has right now. In addition to Thomas V, who's healthy, but even if not, their O-line the Giants have right now is light years ahead of what New England has. Plus Brian Daboll as his coach. And we would have been seeing fun football. So this is the thing.
There's no denying that.
There's no denying that. All these culture issues would have been gone, right? And this whole thing that spiraled can kind of be turned back to the fact that this team has shit quarterback play for 10 games, and now they're looking for all different people to blame for it than not the quarterback, which is fine. I get it. The coach deserves blame. The offensive coordinator deserves blame. The fact that you didn't want to pay Nick McLeod and we're cheap in that, you deserve blame from the regime. But these things only spark because of the fact that they can't move the ball because their quarterback is inept and horrible at the position. So it is something that I consider for sure as I watch New England's culture boom and Washington's culture boom right now.
Yeah, it's just, can the Giants locate that guy in this next draft?
Yeah.
That's the big question at this point. Nobody's denying that winning those Tommy DeVito games had a poor effect on the current state right now, long term. It's just hard to quantify that in the moment because those coaches and those players are playing to win. Obviously, that's their job to do so. So it to me,
and I don't blame them for that, and I don't want the team to ever tank, and I'm not in support of that. All I'm saying is, after the fact, I know that I'm not in support of those wins.
No, of course. It's moot, though.
Right. It's so moot. It is, unfortunately, moot.
It's cope, too. It's cope.
It's a lot of cope.
I understand it. Look, Dan and I, we did all those film breakdowns on the quarterbacks. Dan and I would have loved to get any of the top 3. Drake May was like, that was our guy though, right? Like Drake May is like, Caleb, we're not going to get him anyways. And Jaden, we were comfortable with Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels is balling out of his mind at the moment. I just don't know if the Giants can be able to locate that. I can't wait for the draft though season, man.
Yeah.
Like December, I am going to be grinding through these
I'm
quarterback
excited.
film in December and into January. And once the playoff
December,
happens,
you okay? Let's start December. We're almost in December. People are going to get excited to hear you say the word December.
I mean, I do got a lot on my plate right now, but
know.
yeah, no, it's something that
Might be good to get it cracking a little earlier than usual, though.
I know, but it would have to be like, if I go over a quarterback in December, it would have to be a quarterback who's not going to play in the playoffs, you know?
Right.
And I
Right.
think all
We
of them
want to watch
are,
those
except for
playoff
maybe
games.
Shador. Is Colorado?
Shador is probably. I think Colorado has a shot to make the playoffs at this
Oh
point.
yeah,
They had a big win. Let me see where they're ranked right now. I'm not positive, but I know Cam Ward will probably play in the playoffs, right? Jalen Milroe will probably play in the playoffs.
yeah. Milroe will. Milroe's the
Those
one I
are
really want to watch. Too.
almost near locks. Let's see if Colorado is.
I could just watch the earlier tape.
Colorado's 16 right now. What'd you say?
Oh, okay. I didn't realize they were that good. I said I could just watch some of the earlier tape and then formulate the entire evaluation.
We want to see it all. I know that. And Texas for Quinn Ewers. For those who are still on that train, he'll also be in the playoffs. So I would love to see them in the playoffs, right? We want to see those big game moments and how they perform in those big game moments for sure. But yeah, man, back to the Giants. It's bad. It feels like the culture is on the brink right now. And they, at this point, to me, Shane and Daboll, they have to find a way to save the culture. That's where they're at. It's not what they want it to be. They haven't built this smart, tough, dependable culture that they claim they've built. They have built a culture, whatever that may be. And it was there for a little bit in 2022, and it's been slowly declining, and now it's at the point of collapse.
Let me ask you this. Who on offense and defense are the leaders? Dexter Lawrence, who already made a public statement.
Called out, right.
Now, he said, like, it is what it is. Like, he wasn't necessarily calling them out. He was stating his opinion and saying, hey, it is what it is. And then who is the offensive? Andrew Thomas is not there right now.
We don't have a leader on offense. We haven't had a leader on offense for so long. Barkley was the leader. Your running back can't be a leader.
No, I think the running back can be a leader, but it was Barkley. And then it was Daniel Jones who had the quiet leadership ability, which people say, oh, it's not. It definitely is a thing. Eli had something similar, although I think Eli is a much different person when he's not around a camera. Now you see him coming out of his shell a little bit more.
Right.
Whereas Daniel Jones, I think, led by an example. And now he's gone. So who the hell's the leader on the, like, who is?
Well, he led by example from a work ethic standpoint.
Yeah, from a work ethic standpoint,
of
course.
From a production standpoint.
So, like, is it Greg Van Roten? Like, I don't know. No, but like, he's a veteran who's been around.
Have a leader on the offense.
It might be Jermaine Illuminor. I think it's like those veteran offensive linemen that the Giants have, and can they keep this culture healthy enough for it not to decay into irrelevance and just absolute destitute and ultimately the firing of Brian Daboll? I think Shane's going to be okay. I'm not 100% certain about that, but I really don't believe the Giants want to get rid of a general manager. But the head coach, especially after that head coach, as I brought up about 15 minutes ago, got rid of every other person to blame, like in an effort, he put all of his chips in the middle of the table. What did it do though? Didn't result in wins. Resulted in 2 wins through 10 weeks.
Right. And that's the thing. Like Daboll, I would agree with you. I think Daboll is coaching more for his job than Shane is managing, I guess, for his job. Because Shane's going to have the 2024 class to lean on when he talks to ownership, right? Like he's in a good spot with that. He said, look, the first draft, I didn't have my scouts in. I didn't, I know it wasn't great, but I was in a tough spot. Second draft, we were still learning. We found some pieces we liked. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. And then the third draft, well, we'll see what happens with Deonte Banks. That's going to have to be a good stretch run for him to say that. But the third draft, could be a smash hit right now. Like if Tyrone Tracy and Theo Johnson develop like they can, this could be as good as the 2007 draft, because Malik Neighbors, I just saw Matt Harmon, who's one of the best in the game at breaking down wide receivers, watches tape of every receiver, charts tape of every receiver, say that Malik Neighbors has been the clear-cut best rookie receiver on tape. And that's with Brian Thomas in the NFL right now, who's been unbelievable on tape. That's with Marvin Harrison Jr. in the NFL, who's been good on tape, better of late. Malik Neighbors to him has been by far and away the best. And that's because it's true. If you watch the tape, he's open all the time, every time. He can't throw himself the football, Malik Neighbors. I can tell you that with certainty. He cannot throw himself the football. And yes, he's had 2 bad drops, but he's also had 100+ plays that make up for those drops. But when the quarterback has bad plays, where are the plays that make up for the quarterback's bad plays? Why aren't we holding them accountable to the same degree? And that's what really pisses me off about the Malik Neighbors conversation. Anyone who comes at Neighbors, I will come back at you hard like this, real hard, because the tape is damn clear that he's been the best rookie wide receiver on tape. But stats maybe not there lately. Not his fault. He can't throw himself the football, and that's just the reality situation. But look, this class looks great, so I think it's going to be a big sell for Schoen, and I think you're right. He's pretty safe. But Daboll, man, and the culture, but the problem with me with that, Nick, let me just end it on this. The culture isn't just Brian Daboll, right? The culture is Joe Schoen. It starts with Joe Schoen, and that's the point you were making before.
They're tied together too,
right?
They're like best friends. They came together from.
Why I don't know if you can just
Buffalo.
fire Daboll and keep Schoen.
That's why this is a weird situation too.
Yeah.
And there have been previous owners who have gotten into this situation before. Remember when the Jets, what'd they do? Didn't they keep Rex Ryan and then hire Mike Tannenbaum, or they hired like another general manager and they tried to make it work? And it just
remember that
it just
kind
blew up. It was like a decade ago. It just blew up.
The Jets are a bigger disaster than the Giants, by the way. There's things going on with them yesterday. That was unreal. Reading all that stuff, just unreal.
It is funny, man, because I got a lot of like friends who are Jet fans and everything that. Like, even when the Giants are miserable, the Jets still find a way.
They find a way. They find a way to be more dysfunctional than the Giants, which, we shouldn't laugh at this because we're so pathetic right now that we don't really have the leeway to be laughing at any other franchise. But it is kind of true, to be completely honest. Like, if you read about what happened yesterday with the Jets, like the stuff that was coming out, Woody Johnson wanted to bench Rodgers after the Denver game, like all sorts of crazy shit going on. I think they're going to move on from Rodgers next year, but they just traded for Devontae Adams, which makes no sense. It's just like crazy stuff going on.
There's another go all in moment for Joe Douglas. He went all in, and they couldn't win football games.
Constantly going all in at all times, with no regard. For anything.
Hey man, part of me has respect for people who do go all in, like that. When your back is pushed up against the wall and you're a little bit desperate, but if it doesn't work out, you're gone. And at this point, it's like there really is no way to go all in. Like the Giants don't have recourse to go all into anything at this current moment. They did push their chips into the table prior to this with the Daniel Jones contract and the Saquon Barkley, and now we're 2 years, almost 2 years removed from that. And at this point, if we're just focusing on Brian Daboll's job, there is no go all in. It's just be competent enough not to get fired. Just appease the fan base enough to not have this seat burn through my body because it's so freaking hot at this moment. And that's like the state that Brian Daboll's in, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a state that they kind of built for themselves to an extent. They had an opportunity to make things better this year. They had to, but what they had to do was, I've talked about this in the last episode, and I stand by it. They had to take a hard conversation with themselves and say, we don't need to justify the Jones contract. It's over. We have a large enough sample size to know that it wasn't just the O-line's fault for how bad he played in 23. And his ceiling is not dependent on the games of 2023 with that bad O-line. His ceiling is dependent on all the tape we have, everything we know about him as a quarterback. And they could have pivoted and found some other solution. Guess what? The Steelers, man, they were in a tough spot this offseason at quarterback, right? They had Kenny Pickett on the roster.
They drafted with a first-round pick just 2 years ago.
They drafted with a first-round pick just 2 years ago and used first-round capital on, and he was the only quarterback on the roster. They got insanely creative at quarterback, and they traded a late-round pick that's worth almost nothing most years, except for this year because we got Tracy. Most years it's worth nothing, and they got Justin Fields for that. Then they used $1.5 million of cap space, which is literally nothing. They vet minimum. You can't get anyone of any substance at any other position for that. And they got Russell Wilson out of it. Now the Steelers are beating the Ravens last year, might be winning the AFC North, might compete for the 1 seed in that conference from a spot where they were dead. Because if they just said, oh, we can't get creative, we have no other options, like the Giants basically did at quarterback this offseason. We don't have any options. We have this contract on the books. We have nothing we can do. Let's try to justify the contract by getting him neighbors and improving his offensive line. If they had taken that Giants route and had Kenny Pickett back and been like, we'll get him a receiver, blah, 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 we'll do this, they would be losing games right now. Now, Mike Tomlin doesn't lose many games, Nick, so they'd still probably be 500 somehow with Kenny Pickett.
Duck Hodges, baby.
I don't know how, but with Kenny Pickett, they'd somehow find a way to be 500 with Tomlin. But they wouldn't be competing for the division. They wouldn't be competing for the 1 seed. They wouldn't be beating the hottest team in football like the Ravens last week. And that's because they got creative at quarterback. That's something this regime failed to do. They were stuck in their ways. They wanted to justify the Jones contract, and they left us with this. And now what it's leading to is 2-8 and a lot of dysfunction happening in the locker room, potential locker room collapse, and that's all on them.
And that's a conservative move too, right? Like you made the decision on Daniel Jones and then you sat on your laurels instead of being aggressive and be like, no, we need to exhaust all options to bring in somebody who can be a reliable backup if Daniel Jones does actually suck, which we somewhat fear, but we don't want to really buy into, So if he does fall flat on his face, we need to have another option. And Drew Lock, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. Maybe you guys believed it could be it, and then you brought him in and you're like, oh shit, he really isn't it. And that's a mistake on your evaluation process, which is an indictment on Joe Schoen.
Right. And that doesn't exactly. Neither makes me feel better about this regime moving forward. Either one, they had a huge misevaluation on Locke, or two, they didn't care that much about quarterback and they just wanted to rest on their laurels of Daniel Jones. Either way, how am I supposed to feel confident about a regime that doesn't have creativity or the ability to admit their mistake? Or the ability to evaluate a QB2 that can push a bad QB1 to actually get you wins in season. You can't just grow into a season punting a season. Like, that's just not how, because when you do that, like they have this year, and I consider it punting going with Daniel Jones as an unquestioned QB1, and the results have proven it to be punting. They're 2-8. When you do that, you get this possibility. You get the locker room having comments like this. You get Dexter Lawrence, your leader, making a comment like that. You get the situation that's starting to evolve and unfold, and that could take you down as a regime. So by resting on their laurels, like you said, Nick, it could ultimately cost them their jobs.
I know, man. It's crazy how all of these little mistakes end up becoming, and one big mistake end up compounding on top of each other. And then it's just too much pressure to handle and you capitulate and fall to the ground.
And that's the state of the New York Giants as we head into this week. What is it, 12 now? Are we on week 12? Week 12 game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that's where we're at. This is our franchise. This is what we get. I hope that we can get lucky and scout a quarterback right and hit that, because things will change with that position. I know that. I do still believe that, Nick, that this roster isn't as far as off as a lot of fans say it is, and that's just my own opinion and I'll stand by that. But, as far as the regime goes, that's up in the air right now. They have to keep this locker room intact.
It's that. And dude, remember, before we get out of here, after the 2022 season, one of the things you and I were so excited about was it was a culture that players wanted to come to. That's what we said, right? Like we brought it, we traded for Darren Waller. He's here. It was a culture that people wanted to come to. The Giants were actually a team who could compete. 2023 happened, and now we're in 2024. Who wants to come to the New York Giants right now? Who wants to come and play for one of the most renowned franchises in NFL history?
Nobody.
I don't think a lot of people do. Like the Giants are not the Jets. The Giants are the freaking New York Giants, baby. Like people like to play for the New York Giants. Like the Jets, they're the Jets. They're the younger brother to the Giants. But right now, no one wants to come here because there's no freaking winning. There's no established culture that people want to join. There's nobody to be like, hey, I want to go play with that quarterback. I want to go play with Pat Mahomes. I want to go play with Joe Burrow. I want to go play with Josh Allen. We don't have anything like that, man. We don't have anything like that. If I'm a linebacker, I'd like to come and play behind Dexter Lawrence. But other than that, there really isn't that much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's a bad state of affairs right now. But this is the key. They're gonna have to keep this locker room culture together, because if not, I think they will lose their jobs. And I know that you're right that John Mara, on almost any circumstances, doesn't want to go to a new GM this offseason. But if it collapses, like it did with Jerry Reese and like it did with Dave Gettleman, those were locker room collapses. There's no turning back at that point. You have to then make that call.
And I feel like since the locker room collapsed so recently, that begets more collapse, right? And it's happened so many times in this last half decade to decade. And it's just as locker rooms collapse, that culture is fragile. So like a little bit of adversity could make it collapse and surrender again, right? And just fall on the ground. One more thing I wanted to ask you too.
Such a good point, though. Like the whole culture of, oh, it's happening. It's us again. This is just us. This is happening to us again.
Well, that's one reason why I think that the culture thing, there's value to when it's lip service, but there's also value to bringing in guys that can prevent that from happening, who can be a little bit more resilient in the face of adversity. I don't know if the guys that Joe Schoen has located are that. We'll have to wait and see. one thing I did want to run past you though, Brandon Brown. He's in the building. Brandon Brown, widely respected. When a microphone is in front of him, he usually says something insightful. He has been credited with finding certain players like Daniel Bellinger, who had a big impact earlier in their Giants career, not as used right now. So I look at someone like Brandon Brown. Could that be an option? Is this like just unwind the tourniquet and let you bleed out type of situation? Do you want to let somebody like that go who could be the next general manager, a young guy, smart guy? So he might factor into this as well.
Yeah, he's only 37 years old, which is crazy to
I
me.
know.
He's really risen the ranks. I don't think you want to let him get out of your organization if you can help it. He came from the Eagles, did a great job there, and has theoretically done a very good job here. He was big on Theo Johnson. We'll see if that development continues with DeVito. But we've really liked what we've seen development wise over the last few weeks there. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with this situation, man. We still got so long to go. There's 7 games left in this year for the Giants, right? Oh my God.
We got to do 7 more all 22 breakdowns.
That no one is going to watch and no one's going to click on, and no one.
Please just click on it, guys, on YouTube, and then hit like.
Just click it and auto download it and click it. Please, God, just help us. Make us feel like we're not just doing this for nothing. Just that's what we need. We need that from you. We're at that point of our lives where we need that from you, because it takes a lot of time to do those things, and it's not worth it unless you guys are helping us in some way. It's just a click, and it's just a simple click and a like. 2 clicks, actually. You click on the video, the best thing you can do is just like put it in a tab and let it play throughout, and just
that'd be amazing.
Mute it and let it just play and let it run through all the way. That's actually the best way to help us here in that situation. But everyone else,
as the kids say, man, we're down bad right now.
We're down bad right now. We are down bad. But it'll be draft season soon, which is always fun and exciting in my mind. Just the best time for this podcast, sadly. Sadly, that's our reality, but it's true. It's the reality we live in. So thank you again for tuning in to the Big Blue Banter podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.